Introduction of the panelists here, and we're going to jump right in and talk about convergence of TV, video, and your audience, and how data is playing there. On my immediate left, Stephano Kim, SVP Ad Operations and Chief Data Strategist, Turner. Krishan, Bhatia, Executive Vice President, Business Operations and Strategy, Advertising, Sales, NBCUniversal. We've got Joshua, who I was just working on his last name, but I'm not going to get it right, Chief Technology Officer of TrueX, and Mark Risis, Head of Strategy, Business Development, and Marketing of TiVo. So we've got TV companies here, and some companies owned by TV companies or companies that support TV companies. I'd like to hear, starting with you, Stephano, and then going down, what's the role of a data stack in the data business and data activation in TV? Is it relevant today?
I think it's increasingly more so. I think we start with the premise of our executives just want to make better decisions, right? And that's where data is relevant everywhere. But I think as we talk more about it, obviously our business is changing quite dramatically at a rapid cadence and a rapid pace, and we're just trying to make sense of it all. So this is where I think data in all shapes and forms becomes just ever increasingly important.
Krishan?
I would say it absolutely is, but in addition, and actually before you get to a data stack, I think a lot of television companies have a lot of work to do on what I would consider more basic systems. So we've just gone through 3 years of unifying our television delivery systems, our digital ad stack, before we even get to data, because if you have a great data stack and you can't actually connect it to how we create value for clients from an inventory forecasting and management perspective, from a targeting perspective, from a delivery, from a reporting perspective, then you have nothing. So we had a lot of building block work to do.
This is Pam.
Pam is part of that. Dave knows a little bit of inside baseball, but that work has historically been seen as back office systems for traditional media companies, and for forward-leaning digital media companies, which we fashion ourselves now as well, it is front and center in the strategy. So I think technology overall and advertising systems overall are the #1 priority, and data is one component of that.
So Josh, you obviously come from an environment, a more pure digital environment where data and how that interacts and understands audience engagement is front and center. How does it feel now to be going into a television company?
It's interesting, actually. I think there's a lot from the technology world that is going to be valuable to bring over into the media world. In data, obviously making data-driven decisions, understanding your audience, understanding targeting, being able to pull insights that are understandable by a human, and at the same time actually building optimization systems so that your computing systems, your ad schedulers and whatnot can optimize properly for lift, click-through rate, all the KPIs that are important to advertisers.
So Mark, TiVo has had probably more data available about how people view TV longer in a usable format than any other company. What's happening today that might be different than at some earlier points in the company's history, and also obviously with TRA, another company that was very involved in that?
Yeah, Dave. So you're absolutely right. I think we've had data longer than most. By default, TiVo has always had a return path, and so there was always a mechanism by which the data that was being generated as the viewers are consuming television could be sent back. But for a long time, there was no framework within which a large, very granular data set could be put to use in the television environment. And I think the work being done by the digital side, by the DMPs and large data aggregators and entities that allow data to be matched with other data and create new data sets that are more useful than any one individual set on their own, is now making the television data that we've had for some time and others are starting to gather much more relevant, much more useful. And the burden, I think, now is to continue to push television data further and further outside of television, and at the same time allow the television framework to bring in data sets to make them useful.
So probably the biggest question to everybody out here right now is this one of those panels when you might want to just get up and go do your calls because you're going to lose a break later for your CrossFit thing? Because these guys are talking about television, and Gary's already told us, and all of the trade press and the business press tells you that it doesn't really matter and it's going away. So what I'd like each of you to address is what's your own, each personal or corporate, but whichever you feel comfortable giving, time frame on how long linear television matters, or does over-the-top change, or what is your vision? And if you can give us some, some sense of time frames for this massive disruption. Actually, before you do that, I have a first question. Starting from Mark coming across. I want you each to give a guess, and I want you all to get a number on this one too. How many Americans today do not have internet in the home? Okay, because obviously if we're going to talk about over the top and addressable and on demand and all that stuff, we might need some infrastructure. So I need a number from each of you. Try to guess how many Americans today do not have internet in the home. And Krishan, you may have to go last just because you might have...
Mobile internet count?
Pardon?
Does mobile internet count?
Well, you have to break it out 2 numbers, because if internet in the home, something that's like fixed in the home, but you can give me both numbers. You can tell me how much mobile would change.
Percentage-wise?
Percentage will convert it. There's about 300 plus million Americans.
I'm going to say that about 20% in America don't have internet in their home. I think they use internet on their mobile devices in some shape or form, and they use internet in public spaces like public library and things like that.
Okay.
So I'd say 20.
20.
Okay. Living in California, it feels like it's a lot lower than that. I'm going to go with 10%.
Okay. Krishan?
I think that's about right. I don't know the answer, but I think it's about 20%.
I would guess like 20 to 25% of some sort of, high speed to the home.
Oh, high speed, yeah. Even any internet, would you change it if you counted dial-up?
Yeah, so probably, so call it.
AOL was just sold, and I think there's a little bit of dial-up in the business. 33%. 100 million Americans do not have internet in the home.
Yeah.
And I think the smartphone penetration is still only at 60% right now. And large economic, and it's interesting if you think about geography, it's 1/3 in Manhattan, in New York, not Manhattan, New York City is 1/3 as well. So now I want from each of you, give us your own viewpoint, color it however you want personally and professionally, with what people should be thinking is going to happen what you should be thinking about the role of TV and its changing and over the top and addressable.
So, I'll take a first shot. I think it depends on how you define it, right? Because on the one hand, you can define it as linearly scheduled programming. And I think we all know from our own experience and from what's happening with consumer behavior that with the exception of event-driven media, whether it's sports or news or the like, an on-demand world is the world of the future. And in many cases, that is already the present for younger generations. If you define it as the device that you consume media on, I'm not counting the big screen out, not necessarily in the way that it was delivered in the past. But if you look at what we would consider digitally delivered content at NBCUniversal, almost 2/3 of that is happening on a television device. So we traditionally think about digital as PC and maybe mobile and tablet, but 2/3 of our digital consumption is happening on a television device, mostly through over-the-top connected devices, whether they're TV screens or Roku boxes or Chromecast sticks, etc., or video that's being delivered through dynamically inserted ads in the 4+ window for VOD. So when you add all of that up, that's 60% of NBCUniversal's digital consumption is back on the television screen. So in that sense, television is strong. And then you can define it as content. And I would say that we will all be in this business consuming television-like content for decades to come. I don't think that's changing. I think the distribution of it's changing. I think the scheduling and promotion and marketing of it's changing. Maybe what's relevant to consumers in terms of the type of content that gets created is changing. But I think the power of long-form, high-quality programming is as powerful as it's ever been, and it's only increasing in our mind.
Yeah, I would say, look, I actually very much agree. I don't think television is going away. I think it's starting to change shape and take different forms, and it's following kind of where the users are and how they behave with it and how they want to consume it. And so, a lot of things that my management talks about is that, at some point we stop thinking about ourselves as a cable television company and more as a content production and distribution business. And I personally would take it a step further and say, no, we're a portfolio of brands. And we're really good at creating amazing experiences, right, for those brands, for our advertiser brands, and our client brands. And then now the question is what is the right form that content needs to take shape in? And how do we make that whole experience, right, not just the content itself, but how it gets delivered to an end user, right? How do we make all these things come together in just a very natural native experience for that end user? And so that's also, quite frankly, where we start to get more in tune with the data, right? Because as Turner, we're a portfolio of fantastic consumer-facing brands, but today, quite frankly, we don't have a relationship with the end consumer. So we need to start building that, right? We need to start building that dialogue so we can get that feedback. And in the meantime, right, we're stitching together what data and analytics we can just to get an understanding of, like, not just what they want, but how are they consuming it and what actually is meaningful to them, right?
Josh?
I think one of the big problems today with nonlinear consumption is the fragmentation of the industry. So what I see happening in the next couple of years to make it safe for all the linear consumption to shift onto nonlinear is making everything easily consumable on demand. You shouldn't have to go to 5 different locations to consume your content necessarily. There should be an easy way, at least from the consumer perspective, to pull whatever they want to see at any particular time. In that world, obviously there's a place for television producers. Media is consumed more today than it ever has been. Honestly, it's the golden age of television. Like, I love all those new television shows that are on. So I think that it's going to be very, very interesting in the next couple of years how technology and media come together. The data side of things it's complicated. I think what we really need to do is package up the data in ways that make sense for the current buyers on television and make it a safe place for them to actually move into nonlinear locations, and at the same time making the user experiences really, really powerful and friction-free, because there are many, many choices in people consuming their content online. So if there isn't a really positive user experience, they're going to move into other locations.
Mark?
I think it's important to consider, and this is not news, advertisers have more money invested in television than any other singular form of media, and that's been the case for quite some time. I also think it's inevitable that television will evolve to a more addressable IP-enabled one-to-one delivery mechanism, but I don't think that will happen tomorrow or next year or even the next 5 years. Given the statistics that you cited, Dave, that 33% don't even have internet, certainly, just under half the country doesn't have a DVR. I think connected TV penetration is nowhere near 50% of the country. It's certainly not from activated perspective. It's going to take time for the new model to evolve, and an abrupt shift, an abrupt shoving of the current linear TV model into an IP model of the future will only serve to fragment the market and remove a lot of equity that's already built into it. And I think that will be detrimental both to the sellers of the media and to the buyers who have so much invested. So I think we need a path between now and this IP-enabled addressable future. And I think data is the key to that.
Yes, I like that, Mark, because that pulled together. I think we heard 3 of you who are at television companies talking about the importance of user experience, content. We could have been listening to a movie studio in some ways, or a publishing business. Now, the television industry is supported in the United States by $75 billion a year of advertising revenue, and a lot of the content your companies produce is supported by, another 100 billion plus of advertising revenue outside of the United States too that helps drive the content. How do you imagine this transition? What are the, is it smooth? Is it like Bob Garfield of Ad Age told us, this chaos scenario, it all collapses and then it rebuilds? How do we get from a world where you get what you get and you don't get upset on the TV when it's available in a 30-second spot that still sells stuff, to a world that maybe the perfect user experience is I get to skip all ads?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, actually I want to go back to something that Krishan said earlier, is that it's not chaos, but it's not smooth, right? It's very rocky, and a large part of that is the systems, right? So, to the data...
You're not just saying that because this is Oracle and they sell systems.
We're a data partner, but I guess we spend a lot of money with these people. But ultimately, no, it's it's so funny. Like coming from both a social and digital background, you look at just the television systems themselves, right? And great, the data tells you like, here's a high indexing, or here's a day part with the index is high for the segment that you want. But at the end of the day, it's like it's so rigid, right? Like it's just so hard to make the inventory and therefore kind of the targeting, the segmentation, the whole entire the marketing play at it. It's so rigid, and so there's so much more to be done from just a systems point of view, just to get these things into one place, right? And then actually make that more fluid and be able to be in a dynamic environment, right, where you can really start to work with advertisers to start to tailor that quote-unquote one-to-one message. And then on the flip side, the other thing that we see is, from the buy side, I feel like in some ways, from a systems perspective, they're a little more sophisticated. I mean, I see, marketing platforms, some powered by Oracle, that are actually quite sophisticated. But the buyer mindset of how they approach television hasn't necessarily been integrated all the way through to how they think about the rest of the marketing stack. And so there's a lot of friction, I would say, overall, end to end, that needs to be overcome. And it's unclear how long that will take, but it seems every year that there's just greater urgency to go tackle these big problems.
Krishan?
Yeah, I'm going to, at the risk of contradicting myself, I will agree that the technical platform build out on both sides is nowhere close to where it ultimately needs to be. But put that aside, I actually think that will evolve. I think what needs to evolve more is how we buy, plan, and transact media, and how we let go of current notions and embrace the new that we all talk about as being more data enabled, more audience focused, more targeted. I think when you actually create those offerings and then you engage in a dialogue with an agency or a client around how can we now partner around really deploying that in a fashion that makes more sense for you than what you currently do, that's a really interesting conversation and a very lengthy and involved dialogue that we're finding. So you can turn all the platforms on all day long, but what we're finding with the top 50 marketers that we work with, where we really have very one-to-one conversations with those clients first around enabling those types of platforms, is, okay, I have to look at that in the overall media mix and audience mix and my brand objectives, and this is one piece of it, and if I optimize this piece, how does it affect the rest of the ecosystem and the rest of my buy? That is a very complicated thing. And so technology is important, but how we look at reaching audiences and buying media in a very fragmented landscape is much more important. And there's no technology that's ever going to solve for all of that, quite frankly, I believe. So
Josh, actually picking up on Krishan's point, you're coming from a pure digital point of view into now a television-dominated ecosystem, but we could just say a video ecosystem.
Right.
How do you deal with the holistic thing where you have, let's say, on one side, a television ecosystem where actually lawyers don't even get involved in the making of the deal because they don't sign contracts for their upfronts until afterwards. Whereas a digital world that you've got contracts and data and all sorts of things, and search that might be managed at a client level, not an agency level, and the digital agency is in a different holding company than the TV agency, let alone they speak a totally different language. Like, because there's some of the things I guess you sort of suggest out of what Krishan said. How do you see attacking those as a digital person now inside the belly of the beast?
That's an interesting question. So I think one of the issues as a digital person coming into traditional media, we kind of ruined impressions. So digital people ruined impressions. They're often unviewable, they're often not actual true attention. There's all sorts of issues with impressions as a metric. The television buyers have bought on GRPs, they've bought on basically guaranteed attention. And Gary's talk started talking about how maybe that's shifting and maybe true television attention isn't where it used to be, but it's still a very good metric for actual human attention. So I think what's important as we start packaging things up for television buyers to buy in digital is to define metrics that actually make sense. 100% viewable, 0% bots, actual attention should be table stakes. Like, we should start there. And from there, we move on to how much time did you spend? How much did you interact? What was the actual impact of you from a consumer perspective? So, yeah, that's...
So, Mark, picking up on what Josh just said, and I think this feeds right in a bit into where TiVo and TRA has been for years, Gary told us it's all about selling stuff. I mean, why should we, does it even make sense to live in intermediate metrics of media impressions and gross rating points and engagement if you can close the loop and understand exact ROI and sales?
Yeah.
For those marketers out there, how many times does your CEO say, way to go, I love the engagement metrics you were just giving us last week? Any hands up?
Yeah. I enjoyed Gary's presentation very much, and I think he did a great job of selling Gary. But I'm not sure if F-bombing television and saying it's all shit is really appropriate. Television has consistently proven to be an extremely efficient driver of sales, and it has done so with incredible efficiency. Now I think is the time to ask television to perform a little harder, to work in a more precise fashion, and to begin to pull in the things that are being tested and evaluated and are seen as efficient in other media. I think we're a little bit away from allowing television to be sold based on ROI, based on actual sales, but I think we will get there. There are mechanisms now being put in place to begin to evaluate the delivery of television against sales, evaluate delivery against lift in intent, evaluate television against increase of something that is closer to an actual transaction than just delivery against an HTEX demo. So,
yeah, so, I mean, would that be a bad thing? I heard a talk not long ago from the CEO of McDonald's who said, like, well, are you going to be pushing some money over to social because that's the future? And he said, well, aside from, you know, demographics of the TV audience mapping to his product, he said, if I take my spend down 15 points on TV, just however you want to measure it, I lose 3% market share that week. So one question to you two, might TV really win if it brings the digital kind of ROI measurements in? Might it find it's significantly underpriced?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think in many instances television is significantly underpriced. There are very other mediums that you can hit or reach that many people at the same time globally, right? And so it's so funny. I was talking to a few folks, some startup folks, and you're seeing a lot of these folks start to buy television commercials, well-funded startups, growing companies, and what they're telling me is that pound for pound, they're getting a lot more, I guess, efficacy from whatever data that they're looking at in running a Super Bowl commercial, right, versus spending a ton of dollars against, a massive social buy, right, in addition to a massive long-tail display buy. And so, I personally haven't dug into numbers, but when you start to look into it, it starts to make sense, right? The power of the medium just hasn't been measured to that extent. So I think there is opportunity there. But on the flip side, again, I go back to, it's like, well, you want to reach, just a big proponent of like just a native user experience. Like you want to reach that person where they're going to most engage with you, right, in whatever environment they prefer. And yes, engagement is not the best metric of success, but at the same time, it's a great leading indicator. And ultimately, I think those are the types of folks that will ultimately close or essentially buy your brand.
So Krishan,
I think you answered the question in your prelude, which is television is measured on an ROI basis. Every CMO, every CEO holds their marketing department accountable for ROI as measured by total marketing investment and total sales generated off of that. Can you get more precise than that in every single channel? Obviously. And can television get more precise than that as well? Absolutely. And those are a lot of the tools that I think the companies here on stage and others are working on. But I think the ROI accountability is already there for television. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as healthy an ecosystem as it has been. And I think in addition to that, we all know, and you know this as well, that the benefit of ROI measurement that digital media gets is often fueled by the awareness that television fuels. So we actually have to look at those two components in connection to really measure ROI overall. And if you take one component out, which is the awareness medium, you're going to see a significantly different ROI equation on your digital spend as well.
Yeah, this is one of the points I want to hit. I mean, my company recently created a partnership with Blue Kai just so we can target digital on TV and measure the digital Blue Kai segments on TV. What about the TV plus digital or the digital plus TV? So let's not look at one against the other. What are the perspectives that you all have about what's going to, is there a 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 when you start tying the things together?
We've done a number of studies that look at cross-platform delivery tied to very significant KPIs like sales, like conversion, and consistently 1 + 1 does equal 3 in terms of the additive effect is a lift higher than either one of the media can deliver. And we don't speculate on the causation. Was it the awareness generated on TV, or was it the lower funnel conversion mechanisms built into the banners, or the pre-roll video that drove the ultimate lift? But we do see this consistency that the two media in harmony playing together. And I think to the work that you're referencing, that you're doing with Blue Kai, and what I think others in the room and on stage here are looking to do, is using the same data set across both television targeting and digital targeting, I think will further increase the amplification effect of the two media working in harmony. Treating them separately, I think, removes the added benefit that we consistently see being delivered.
So Stephano, is this why you all just announced that Turner has a DMP?
Yeah, I mean, this is where, I think a lot of our work, especially with the good folks here at Oracle, it's about, I think we know, right, that there's a combinatorial effect. I think we know that there's synergy there, right? And so now the next step for us anyways is like, how do we start to harmonize these things, right? So yeah, we might have, you might have a different demo watching CNN on television versus, the folks who are, consuming CNN on Snapchat. There may be some overlap, they might not be, but how do we start to harmonize those experiences where it gets really interesting when you can not only just manage global reach across all these mediums, right, or media, I should say, but now you can monitor your investment, right? How do you measure, or how do you, optimize the frequency at which you touch these people, right, channel by channel, medium by medium, right? And I think that's what becomes super interesting. And so it's not just about individual channel ROI, but as a campaign, as a media plan overall, I think that becomes super interesting.
So to each of you, and I think maybe because we'll finish on this, when Stephen was interviewing David Kenny earlier today, one of the things he was pressing was, you've got this great data story, it's complex, we're all talking about the complexity and friction. Let's just assume the sell side is enabled. Who is the buy side of these complex, more holistic, data-driven programs? Is it the agency? Is it the digital person at the agency, a search buyer? Is it the client? Is there an interface? Is it software or people?
I mean, I would argue it's clients first and foremost leaning into whatever partners, whether they're agencies or other partners that they're employing, to affect a positive change in their marketing story. And what we're finding, just in terms of the clients that are engaging with us around advanced advertising products, it's clients that have leaned in for a while to have a more sophisticated approach to customer relationship management, who have a better handle on their own customer data and transactional data, and who have experimented in the digital ecosystem and are thirsting to be able to apply some of that intelligence and those insights in the most effective medium that drives their overall marketing mix, which is television. So those are the clients, and they're category almost across all categories. They're retailers, they're CPG companies, they're financial service companies, they're auto companies, they're telco companies. Those are the 5 or 6 big categories where we really see forward-leaning clients driving change.
I think it starts with the CMO's office. I think you start with the premise that the CMO's office is no longer a cost center. It is a revenue center. It is a growth center, And I think they come up with a holistic strategy of how they're going to move the business forward, whether it's market share, whether it's profit, whether it's
Can
product
that happen in
launches.
the same person? I mean, do you think?
And then, well, I think what happens is then as that branches out, because that is a large problem, right? That you start to bring in your execution, your strategy partners, right? To help bring these things together. And I think, at least for us, our philosophy is that, ultimately it is driven by the marketer's office, but at the end of the day, we've got to be able to meet and transact with all of these partners in between along the way to bring that plan together. And that's our endeavor anyway.
Yeah, I think it becomes a shift from a mentality of expense and managing expense in the most efficient way to managing investment. And so when you apply investment mentality, like a financial investor, you're looking in placing your money where the return is higher than what you're paying out. And that mentality can certainly come from the agency, provided that they evolve their mechanism and their outlook instead of the most efficient way to spend money, the most efficient way to allocate money. But it also opens up the field to others who have that mentality to come in and improve the efficiency. Just like in financial services, what used to be the purview of traders on a single floor, like buyers, television, now you have trading systems set up anywhere virtually, and the skill sets that are utilized by traders today are certainly not the same ones sitting at the desk 20 years ago, drinking whatever or doing whatever else they were doing in a closed environment. I think it opens it up and allows those that are best at investing clients' money to generate equity, generate sales, to participate.
Excellent way to finish. We are out of time. Thank you all. Thank you, panel. Great job.